Good day, everyone. I'm so glad you're here today. God has a word for you today, and I believe this message will speak to your heart in ways you didn't even know you needed. So lean in, open your spirit, and let's walk this journey of faith together. Have you ever felt stuck? Like you're standing in the middle of a dry, empty field, overlooked, underestimated, and maybe even forgotten. But what if I told you the very place you feel trapped in right now is the same place God is preparing to launch you into your destiny? Because the God we serve doesn't just pull people out of pits, He raises them to palaces. He doesn't just deliver you from the valley, He elevates you to the mountaintop, from grass to grace. I want you to think about David, a shepherd boy, tending sheep in the fields, forgotten by his own family when Samuel came looking for the next king. His father didn't even bother to call his name, because in his father's eyes, David was just grass, just a boy in the backfield. But what people fail to recognize, God never overlooks. David was anointed in private before he was ever appointed in public. And some of you need to understand that your hidden season, your season of obscurity, is not a season of rejection. It's a season of preparation. Because God never plants a seed without planting a harvest. You might be working a job right now where no one sees your effort. You might be praying for a breakthrough, but it feels like heaven is silent. You might be building something, a dream, a family, a business, and it feels like no one cares. But let me remind you, God sees you. Just like He saw David in the pasture, He sees you in the process. And the same God who anointed David while he was still in the field is the same God who is working behind the scenes in your life right now. The journey from grass to grace isn't always easy. There's a gap between the promise and the promotion, and that gap is filled with faith. David didn't become king overnight. He fought lions and bears in private before he ever faced Goliath in public. And some of you are facing battles right now that no one sees. The silent struggles, the midnight tears, the constant rejections. But those battles are building you. The fight you're in today is training for the throne God is preparing for you tomorrow. When the time was right, David didn't have to force his way to the throne. God opened the door. And that's a word for someone today. You don't have to manipulate, push, or compromise to get where God is taking you. His grace will carry you. His favor will promote you. You might be standing in the grass today, but grace is already on its way. I need you to grab hold of this truth. Your current situation is not your final destination. God is lifting you from grass to grace. So don't quit. Don't give up. Don't let the enemy convince you that this field is your final resting place, because there's a crown waiting for you. And when God says it's time, no person, no circumstance, and no setback can stop His plan. You were made for more. You were created for greater. And His grace will take you places your grind never could. Listen to me. The field you're standing in right now may look ordinary, but it's a divine setup. That job you think is meaningless, it's shaping your character. That season of waiting, it's teaching you to trust God's timing. There's nothing wasted in God's plan. What looks like a delay to you is actually a design by God. He's aligning the right people, opening the right doors, and preparing your heart so that when you step into your grace season, you'll be ready to carry the weight of the blessing. And let me remind you, the same God who saw David's heart when no one else did, sees yours too. He sees your late nights, your silent prayers, and your unwavering faith when everything around you says, give up. There's a purpose in the process. You may be in the grass now, but that doesn't mean you'll stay there. God is a God of sudden lies. One day you're tending sheep. The next day you're anointed king. Don't despise small beginnings. The field is where your faith is forged. The pasture is where God prepares you for the palace. It's not a punishment. It's a platform for what's coming. Think about Ruth. She wasn't born into privilege. She was a Moabite, a foreigner, a widow. Yet in her season of brokenness, she chose to follow Naomi and trust in the God of Israel. She gleaned in the fields, picking up the leftovers, but God saw her faithfulness. It was in those fields of humility that God aligned her path with Boaz, a man of influence and favor. Ruth's story didn't end in the fields. It led to a future of grace as she became part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. What does that tell us? God can take you from picking up scraps to walking in supernatural favor, from being overlooked to being divinely positioned. Your faithfulness in the fields is a setup for His grace to find you. Look at Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. In the middle of a drought, God sent Elijah to a widow who was preparing her last meal for herself and her son. She was ready to give up. But Elijah told her, "Do not be afraid," and asked her to make him a small cake first. It didn't make sense. How could she give when she had nothing? But when she obeyed God's word, her jar of flour never ran dry, and her jug of oil didn't run out. What looked like the end was actually the beginning of God's provision. Your obedience, even in a dry season, opens the door for God's grace to overflow in your life. You may feel like you're walking through a season of silence right now, but God's silence is not His absence. Sometimes He's the quietest when He's doing His deepest work. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean He's not moving. God's plans often unfold in the unseen. Just like a seed grows roots before it breaks through the soil, your breakthrough is building beneath the surface. Trust the process, because what He's growing in you now will soon be visible for all to see. When the enemy whispers lies that you're forgotten, that your dreams are too big, that your time has passed, remind him who your God is. The same God who took Joseph from the pit to the palace, Esther from obscurity to royalty, and David from grass to grace is still at work today. This is your season of becoming. You're not stuck. You're being shaped. You're not overlooked. You're being prepared. The crown is closer than you think. So stand firm. Keep the faith. Declare God's promises over your life daily. Speak life into your dreams, hope into your future, and confidence into your spirit. Because the grass may be beneath your feet today, but grace is rising within you. And when God says move, nothing and no one can stop your elevation. If this message stirred something in your spirit today, I want you to declare in the comments, I'm going from grass to grace. And if you're ready to walk boldly into God's promises, hit that subscribe button and join this community of faith where we speak life, hope, and victory every single day. God's not done with your story. The best